I don't think, ultimately, that today's gospel is meant to teach us that being rich is bad and being poor is good. I know that some will read it that way, but I just don't see that message in the text. Instead, what I see in the text is the idea that we, all of us, have trouble seeing the need that is around us and our duty to respond to that need. The text today sets up two sets of contrasting worlds. First, there are the contrasting worlds of the rich man and the poor man. The rich man is dressed in purple and fine linen. Pretty impressive stuff to be wearing. Fine linen is, of course, the best fabric that would be available, and having some or all of it dyed purple would be really expensive and luxurious. It might even imply royalty. At the least, it would imply being in the top 1%. And then we're told that the rich man feasted sumptuously every day, not just when there was an occasion for a feast or a grand celebration, but every day. And of course, the rich man lived in a gated community. Outside the gate, but looking in, was the poor man. In the parable, his name is given as Lazarus. Now that's interesting, because according to 4 commentaries that I read, this is the only character in any of the parables of Jesus that's given a name. More about that in a minute. Lazarus is described as covered with sores and hungry. He hopes to eat the scraps that fall from the table of the rich man. In one of those images that will probably cause most of us to shudder, we're even told that dogs came to lick the sores on his body. Although at least one commentary I read suggested that that was not as bad as it sounds, the idea being that the saliva of dogs has some healing properties. I'm not sure I fully accept that notion. Seems to me that to be an after-the-fact sort of excuse. The image here, I think, is more the image that we also get in the book of Job, of someone who is in total despair and at the bottom of the barrel. Now, the parable does not tell us that the rich man was mean to Lazarus. Indeed, the parable seems to say that the rich man was simply indifferent to him. In a sense, he could not see him. Similarly, the parable does not tell us that Lazarus made any approach to the rich man. In other words, we're left with an image of what is, not with any action that we can easily condemn. In the last note from this contrasting world, we're told that both died, and the rich man received a proper burial. Lazarus, of course, did not. Now about that name. The commentaries tell me that Lazarus is the Greek form of the name that in Hebrew would be Eleazar, which means God helps. In the Bible, it is frequently the case that names have meaning and suggest the message we're supposed to take from the text. Here we're told that Lazarus, Eleazar, God helps, was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. And now we're switched to the second set of contrasting worlds. Here's the rich man in Hades in torment. He looks up and sees Lazarus with Abraham. Now notice that there's no fanciful description of paradise here. All we're told is that Lazarus is by Abraham's side. However, the clear implication is that at the least, Lazarus is not in torment. At the most, I would like to think that Lazarus has been comforted and fed and clothed and is enjoying some form of paradise. Remember Mary's words in the Magnificat, where she describes the God who has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. But in fairness, that's not what this parable says. But notice the exchange between the characters in this part of the parable. The rich man still does not seem to acknowledge Lazarus as important. He talks to Abraham and asks Abraham to send Lazarus to bring him some water to relieve the torment. In other words, Lazarus is still just someone to do his bidding. And there's still no sense of contrition, no sense of self-awareness that somehow he is deserving of this fate. When Abraham tells him that no relief is possible, the rich man then asks that Abraham send Lazarus to warn his brothers. Again, notice that Lazarus is just someone to be ordered around. In any event, Abraham again says no and tells the rich man that he and his brothers have plenty of warning in Moses, in the Torah, and the prophets. Perhaps even the prophetic word we heard today from Amos. Alas for those who are at ease in Zion. Alas for those who lie on beds of ivory and lounge on their couches and eat lambs from the flock and calves from the stall, and who drink wine from bowls and anoint themselves with the finest oils, but are not grieved over the ruin of Joseph. Prophetic words. And Abraham even says that even if someone returned from the dead, it would not be effective. As I said, I don't think this is a parable about riches being inherently evil or poverty being inherently virtuous. At least I hope not, because by any rational measure, we in this country and time are wealthy beyond the dreams of the past or people in other parts of the world. But I do think this parable is intended to draw to our attention is what we do with our wealth. I also think this is a parable about how we acknowledge each other, whatever our station in life. Robert Frost wrote a poem about walls. You may remember it. It's called Mending Wall. It's about neighbors who have clear boundaries on their neighborliness. Frost wonders aloud why it is that we divide ourselves. He says, on a day we meet to walk the line and set the wall between us once again. We keep the wall between us as we go. There is, I think, something in all of us that likes those clearly defined boundaries of what's my place and what's yours. How many times have each of us felt that impulse to mark out our space and erect a wall to keep the world outside? Frost winds down with this thought. There, where it is we do not need the wall, he is all pine and I am apple orchard. My apple trees will never get across and eat the cones under his pines, I tell him. He only says, good fences make good neighbors. Spring is the mischief in me, and I wonder if I could put a notion in his head. Why do they make good neighbors? Isn't it where there are cows? But there are no cows. Before I built a wall, I'd ask to know what I was walling in and walling out, and to whom I was like to give offense. Perhaps the boundaries and walls we have drawn are not so much between us and our neighbors as between us and God. Consider who might be on the other side of that wall or that gate. In Matthew 25, Jesus tells us that he is the one lying at our door, hungry and thirsty, imprisoned and cut off. He is the one that you can just as easily walk by, just as the rich man was unaware of Lazarus and indifferent to him. Who is it that we will find when we hear the knocking at the gate and we answer it? We may not find someone who looks like us, but we may very well find someone who looks like our God if we're paying attention.